Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the high-stakes world of corporate separations. We're talking about how you carve up a massive company, which is honestly one of the most complex things a business can ever do.
So, let's kick things off with a pretty simple question, but one that has billion-dollar consequences for some of the biggest companies on the planet.
And look, we're not just talking about who gets the good office chairs. We're talking about everything. The cash, the patents, those super complex software systems, even entire data centers. This question, right here, is the absolute heart of a corporate divestiture.
Yeah, a corporate divorce is the perfect way to think about it. This whole process is called asset allocation, and it is almost always the most heated part of any split. The decisions made here, they don't just tweak a balance sheet, they literally shape the future of the brand new companies. Now, this isn't just some textbook theory. A major Silicon Valley tech giant went through this exact thing. When they were splitting up, the new, bigger company, the one with 80% of the employees, argued for a 50-50 split of the assets. But the smaller entity, with only 20% of the people, said, "No way, we only want 20% of the assets to match our size." This disagreement caused a total standoff, putting the whole deal in jeopardy. Now, hang on to that thought because we are going to circle back to how they figured this out.
So, what is it that makes this process so incredibly hard? Why is dividing up the assets a top of mind, keep you up at night concern for the executives in charge?
Well, the real problem comes down to this term, commingled assets. These are things that are just woven into the very fabric of the company. Just picture one giant software system that runs literally everything, finance, HR, you name it, for every single part of the business. How on earth do you even begin to untangle something like that?
And this right here really shows you how tangled that web can get. IT assets are by far the messiest part of the pie. Look at that. Application software alone can make up almost half of the total book value. That's the official value of an asset on the company's books. And it's all connected to servers, data centers, and employee hardware. It's a huge, complicated puzzle. This is exactly why CEOs and CFOs have to get this right. It's not optional. It directly hits the company's valuation. It's legally required for regulatory filings with agencies like the SEC, and it basically sets the budget for future operating costs. You mess this up and you could saddle a new company with millions in what are called stranded costs. That's money you're paying for assets you don't even use. Okay, so with all that complexity and with stakes this high, how do companies actually land on a solution that's not only fair, but also makes good business sense? Well, believe it or not, there's a playbook for this, a clear 5-step plan. You start by taking inventory of every single thing. Then, you group it all into logical categories. You divide it up based on rules everyone agrees on beforehand. You use cash to even things out if you have to. And you keep tweaking the plan as you go. It's how you turn total chaos into a process you can actually manage.
All right, that's the playbook. But what does this actually look like in the real world? How do you really decide who gets what? The secret is to have simple, logical rules. Honestly, some of it is pretty straightforward. End user stuff like laptops and phones, they just go with the employees. Assets tied to a specific building, they go to whoever gets that building. It gets trickier with shared software, but then you just use clear metrics, like how many people use it or how much revenue it helps generate, to figure out a fair split.
So let's run through a quick example. Imagine we have to split up an IT portfolio that has a total book value of a cool $900 million. So, by using different rules for each category, you get a much more thoughtful result. Here you can see the end user gear is split 80-20, which probably reflects where the employees went. But the data centers, they're split 60-40, likely based on usage. So the final tally isn't a simple, clean 50-50. It's a carefully calculated 60-40 split that actually reflects what both of the new companies really need. But what happens if you just skip this careful process? What are the real-world consequences when the split is lopsided? Well, there are two massive risks, and either one can basically cripple a new company right out of the gate. If you get too many assets, you're just bogged down with huge costs for stuff you don't even need, and that kills any flexibility you might have. But if you get too few assets, you start day one with a weak balance sheet and have to spend a fortune just to get up and running. This right here is the danger zone. Getting the allocation wrong traps a company here. It's stuck with high stranded costs for old tech it doesn't need, it can't invest in the future, and it struggles to hit its financial goals from the very beginning. The goal, of course, is to land right here in this success zone.
This is where both new companies have a lean, flexible foundation, their stranded costs are low, and they're free to actually transform and grow from the second they're on their own.
Which brings us all the way back to our Silicon Valley tech giant. How did they solve that standoff? How did they bridge the gap between an 80-20 demand and a 50-50 demand? Simple. They brought in an objective third party to run the exact playbook we just talked about. By using a process based on logic and clear criteria, they were able to get past those initial demands and focus on what would actually make both new companies successful.
And this gets us to the most important point of this entire process. The best solution wasn't 80-20, and it wasn't 50-50. It was an equitable 60-40 split, just like in our example. It was a solution designed to balance the needs of both new companies.
And that really leaves us with one last thing to think about. The goal of a successful separation, whether it's in a boardroom or, well, in life, isn't always a perfectly equal 50-50 split. It's about equity. It's about making sure both parties are set up not just to survive, but to actually thrive on their own.